Recording. And Craig, I'm going to hand it off to you then.
Awesome. Thanks, Zap. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm excited to present this. So the title of this presentation is Culture May Eat Strategy for Breakfast, but Strategy is the Menu. Many of us have probably heard that famous Drucker quote, Peter Drucker, Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast. And that's very true. But without having strategy, without knowing how we're going to compete in the marketplace, all the good culture in the world doesn't really do anything. And the whole purpose of organizational culture is to execute. It defines how the organization acts. And so what we're going to talk now about is what should the organization act on. This is going to be recorded. Zap is recording it, but also at the end of this presentation, there will be a link to my website where you can go and book a meeting with me and download all of these slides and download some worksheets to help you implement what we're going to talk about. All right, so poll number 1 coming up. How many presidential elections have you been eligible to vote in? So today being election day, I kind of wanted to know how many presidential elections have you been eligible to vote in? And
I think I launched the poll, but I'm also worried it's asking everyone every question, I'm realizing.
Yes, it is somehow. I think that is the answers, I guess. I'm not quite sure. All right, so just answer in the chat. I am at, yes. No, that's not right. Yes, I'm that old. All right, Colin. All right, it's fine. Somebody's just as old as me. Good. Thanks, Colin. Appreciate that. Wow. All right. And Brendan, we got a newbie. Cool, Brendan. Glad to have you on board. All right. So I hope everybody voted this time. And I'll end the polling. All right, let's continue on. Little cartoon. Everybody's sitting around the boardroom. You've probably maybe been in this situation in former corporate life. 10 minutes left. Let's do the strategy, right? And a lot of times that's where strategy is. Strategy is the last thing we think about because we're really much more worried about, pressing things. We need to hire somebody or fire somebody, or there's a customer client problem. Cash flow isn't where it is. So we save really thinking about strategy to the very end. So we're going to talk a lot today about what strategy is. But first, who's me? Who is this guy, Craig Paxson? So I am a small business coach at Visionary Results. As Zap mentioned, I am a mentor with an advisor with the EC. I'm also a mentor with SCORE, and I help Jumpstart. Former CEO, so I ran a small business. I am a certified executive coach and an accredited small business consultant. If you want to know more about me, sign up at the end of this seminar for a time slot to meet me. All right, poll number 2, we got to put this in the chat. Using one word, what do you think is the major challenge your business is facing? And put that in the chat, and I'm just going to sort of just read them off a little bit. Okay, good, Angela. Not knowing target market personas, okay. Anybody else? Got a group of people who don't like to type.
I know. Come on. We're going to start calling on folks.
Right.
That's why I like the in-person. I can peer pressure people.
Yes.
To answer questions.
Okay, sales. All right, thanks, Colin. Scaling the company. All right, good, Tanisha. Appreciate that. Oh, a disruptive offering. Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. All right, so let's continue on. Startup independent, Jen. Very good. All right, so what we're going to talk about. what strategy is and is not, how to define your strategy, and then how to execute your strategy. So we're going to talk through all three of these areas. All right, so first of all, what is strategy? This is my definition of strategy. My definition of strategy is the capabilities required to compete in the chosen market and achieve organizational results. So a lot of times we think that these things are strategy, but they're not. Strategy is not long-term or high-level plans. Just because something takes a long time or it seems like it's very high level, it's not necessarily strategy. Strategy is big projects, kind of in line with long-term and high level. Just because a project is big doesn't mean it's strategic. Financial or marketplace projections. One of my clients said their strategy was to grow by 200% over the next 5 years. Well, that's not really a strategy, that's an end result. And then proprietary or advanced technology by itself is not a strategy. Proprietary and advanced technology, a new app or a new website, may help with implementing a strategy, but in and of itself is not necessarily a strategy. So why is having strategy important? So it defines how the business will compete. It drives pricing and marketing. It drives decision making, and it determines the actions to be taken and the resources required. Remember the definition of strategy. It is the capabilities required to compete in the market and obtain organizational results. If strategy is not linked back to the market, it doesn't define how the company is going to compete in the market, and it doesn't also help the organization achieve the results that they desire, it is not strategy, or it at least isn't good strategy. So how do we actually get strategy? Well, there's 3 phases in my system. The phase 1 is define, which is define the required strategic capabilities. Then in phase 2, we plan, we convert that definition into a plan of actions. And then in phase 3, we execute, measure, review, and adjust. Right now, we're going to talk about define, this first phase. The define phase has 4 different areas: purpose and vision, what the company, a lot of times it might be in a mission statement or a vision statement, but basically who the company serves, what problem they solve, and why that's important to them, and then where the company wants to be in the future. Desired results, which we will talk about in more detail in a minute. What the competitive market looks like. And finally, the desired results and the competitive market create the required strategic capabilities. So let's continue on. All right, desired results. We're going to skip purpose and vision because there's lots of things about mission and vision statements. I look at desired results in these 3 areas: financial, market, and societal. So in the financial perspective, we can think about things like profitability and growth. So that might be cash in the bank or cash flow, some measure of profitability like EBITDA or EVA, maybe a growth of, we're going to grow by 200%. Market, customer results or market share. So things like, how do we know that the customers are succeeding? Is there a way that we can measure that? What is our market share? Do we want our market share to be larger, stay the same, have a certain penetration that we desire? And then finally, societal results, things around society and our workforce. What do we want our workforce to look like, and how do we want them to feel? What impact do we want to have on society outside of our market? And we look at these in long-term and short-term. So long-term, 3 to 5 years, and then short-term over the next maybe quarter or 6 months, because the short-term may put constraints on what we're able to do. These desired results are always numeric. So they're going to be numeric or perhaps yes, no. But these are going to be numeric. So we're going to come up with a few metrics, a few results for these financial, market, and societal aspects that we want to have in the future. So once we have our desired results, we need to look at our competitive market. So we're going to talk here a little bit. This was not know from Angela, from Colin, about the competitive market. I look at the competitive market with just a couple tools, and there's a lot more tools that we're not going to talk about in this presentation that we can use to help define our competitive market, but I just use a couple, and a couple of them are pretty innovative. So the first one is what's called the strategy curve. This is an adaptation of the strategy map from Blue Ocean. Blue Ocean is a wonderful consulting company. They wrote a great book called Blue Ocean Strategy. And so it's the strategy curve. We'll talk more in detail about that in a moment. The next thing is the value proposition, who, what, 3 whys, and then pricing. And then, okay, so let's go back to the strategy curve. All right, so a strategy curve, it defines on the x-axis, the factors that 2 different or many organizations compete in. So we look at, say, in the year 2000, Amazon versus Walmart. Our vertical axis is composed of low and high, and it doesn't really matter the scale here. The big thing is really to understand the difference in the shapes of their curve, as opposed to, is it actually low or high? So let's look at this. For instance, in the year 2000, Amazon and Walmart both had low prices. Amazon had a fairly high online presence, whereas Walmart really had very low online presence. Physical stores, Amazon very low, Walmart very high. Variety, Walmart had more variety than Amazon. Food, Walmart had some food, Amazon really had none. And on the delivery side, the speed of delivery, Walmart was a lot quicker than Amazon, because obviously you could just go to the store and get it. And if you order from Amazon, it might be days or weeks before you got your product. Supplements, which are products that can be used with the product they're selling, Walmart was pretty low and Amazon was higher because they have their suggestions, right? When you go shop, you find some other suggestion. So in the year 2000, this is what the strategy curve looked like for Amazon versus Walmart. Let's go on to the year 2020. So now we can look at these exact same factors and say, okay, Amazon and Walmart both have low prices. Walmart has an online presence that's a lot higher than it was. Amazon still has a fairly low physical presence, although that might be a little bit higher if you count Whole Foods as a subsidiary, whereas Walmart has high. Variety, they both have extremely high variety. Walmart still has a little bit more food. Speed of delivery, Amazon now is extremely high, although not quite as high as going to the market, or going to the store. And then supplements, Walmart now has really almost caught up to Amazon in the suggestions that they make of what you could purchase if you bought one thing. So the important thing here is is Craig's analysis of Amazon versus Walmart correct? The important thing here is to understand and to look at you and your competitors and say, what are the factors that you compete with them on? And then try to rank those factors so that you can see where you are different and where you are the same as your competitors or as the other portion of the market. And then once you do that, we can use this to say, okay, should I create some new factors that my competitors don't have? Should I eliminate some of the factors, or should I raise or lower some of the factors? So look at price, which is always one of the biggest competitive differentiators. Should my price be higher or lower than my competitors? So what are the factors that you and your competitors compete on, and how can you make the factors different than your competitor to make you different, to differentiate you from your competitors? This is a great tool, the strategy curve, a great tool for coming up with differentiation with your competitors. Once we've done that, we come up to the value proposition. I divide the value proposition into these 4 areas: who, what, the pricing, and then the 3 whys. So who, obviously, who do we sell to? Who was our customer? Who was the potential client? What are we selling them? What is the product or service? What is the pricing like? Low or high? Is it a subscription? Is it a single price? What is the pricing? Are there pricing supplements like a maintenance plan or something like that? And then finally, what I call the 3 whys. A, need. Why does the customer, the potential customer, buy this product or service at all? B, differentiation. Why buy from us? Why buy from you? And then C, trust. Why should they trust us? Why should they trust you? Those 3 whys, if we answer those 3 whys, a lot of times we come out with understanding our target market a lot more, and we understand our sales and business development a lot more. We look at trust. I like to look at things called brand promises. What do you promise your market? For us who have voted in 10 presidential elections, we remember Domino's, 30 minutes or it's free, right? That was a brand promise. So what are the brand promises? This could be a great builder of trust. Things like money back guarantees can be a brand promise. But what are the things that you promise your customers? And then one thing we're going to do as a company is we would track metrics around those brand promises to make sure that we're delivering. Now, the important thing to understand here, or to see, is to see how our strategy curve that we just did ties into the value proposition, right? Especially when it comes to differentiation. Why buy from us as opposed to our competitors? We create a different strategy curve that helps us answer the differentiation why question. And then finally, we move to the strategic capabilities matrix. So I invented this a while ago based on a lot of research. A lot of this stuff looks very similar to the business model canvas, which maybe some of you have seen, but it puts it in a little bit different format that sometimes makes it easier to really understand. Every organization, from the smallest mom and pop bakery all the way up to Amazon or Toyota or General Electric, has 4 verticals that they need to understand and they need to execute on. One of them is sales, selling the product or service to the clients. The next one is delivering that product or service. Then collecting money that is owed to them. And finally, governing the organization. Selling obviously makes sense, right? If we can't sell, we're not gonna be in business very long. If we don't deliver a product on time, a good quality product, a product that meets our brand promises, we're not gonna stay in business. If we don't collect the money that's owed to us, right? And so we need to define how we're going to collect that money. Is it money up front, with a credit card? Do we send a PO? How do we ensure that we get that cash? And then finally, govern the organization. Things like filing our taxes, doing the appropriate governmental actions, hiring, training, firing, those kinds of activities in the organization. Every organization must do all 4 of these verticals. These create a matrix out of these 5 different capability types. The first one is organizational policies. What are the organizational policies around selling, delivering, collecting, or governing the organization? Again, as it relates back to our value proposition and our strategy curve. And so a very simple organizational policy to understand is the amount of commission for salesmen. Salesmen that have 100% commission versus no commission obviously would act very differently, and that is simply an organizational policy. The next one is organizational structure. What is inside the organization? So what parts of the structure are inside, what functions are inside, and what functions are outside the organization? who reports to whom, how does information flow throughout the organization, and how are decisions made. A lot of times in organizational structure, we think of just the reporting hierarchy, right? Just who reports to whom. But it's also important to understand, do we even want this function inside the organization? Should we instead put this function outside the organization? Should we outsource it? How is information flowing between different people or different departments in the organization, and how are decisions made? Because a lot of times the optimal way that decisions are made or that information flows is different than the traditional organizational hierarchy. The next thing is skills and abilities. What skills and abilities do our people need to sell, deliver, collect, and govern the organization? So we're going to list out those skills and abilities, and those are capabilities that we need to have in order to compete in the market and obtain our organizational results. Next would be tools and resources. So this might be things like websites or equipment or facilities, right? So what tools and resources are necessary, are required to sell, deliver, collect, and govern the organization. Then the next is key processes. What are the processes that we need to have in place, again, in order to sell, deliver, collect, and govern? What are those key processes? And those key processes can be across any one of these 4 vertical domains. I'll give you an example. One of my clients is a catering company, and they have most of their employees, and I put that in quotation marks, are contract workers who only come when they have an event, right? So they have an event, they have 3,000 people at the event, and they have to cater that event, and they don't have 3,000 people in or they don't have 100 people to do the catering in their organization. They hire contractors to come in for one night. So an important part in the govern for them is recruiting and hiring those contractors. So an important key process for that particular organization is hiring and training. Another one of my clients is a mom and pop shop. I don't think they've hired or fired anybody in 25 years. So a key process for them is not hiring and training. So every organization is going to have different key processes in order to sell, deliver, collect, and govern to fulfill the brand promises of their organization. All right, so here's a poll. Is your strategy linked to the current marketplace, linked to the realities of the current marketplace? Yes or no? So again, probably just have to put this in the chat or think about it. If your strategy is not linked to the realities of the current marketplace, it may be time to rethink the strategy. Can you make that link? All right. Good.
I'd be concerned if someone put no, though.
What's that,
Come on,
Zap?
they're entrepreneurs. They've pivoted. They're making it work. We're running a whole program about it. I'd be concerned if someone said no. I was like, y'all not ready for this?
All right. So for phase 1, any questions? Anybody? We can raise your hand. Zap will unmute you, or put it in the chat. Any questions so far?
Any questions? Okay.
All right, good. So that means either this is really bad or really good. One of the two. That's the way it always works. All right, so let's go into phase 2 of strategic planning and execution. Convert this definition into a plan of actions. So we have this matrix of required strategic capabilities. So the first thing we do in phase 2 in planning is to pull out those key processes. Let's list out those key processes that we have and do 2 things with them. One is figure out what I've renamed KPIs, key process indicators. What are the metrics? What are the things that we should measure about that key process to understand if it is working well or if it is not working well? If we know that we have 7 key processes in the company, we need to make sure that we're measuring key indicators around those processes to know if they're working well or they're not working well. So there's a lot of information online or in my programs that I can teach people about creating and using key process indicators. But it's really important that if you've defined a key process, you have some way of knowing whether it's successful or not. Then the second thing about key processes is documentation. If Joe is the only person who knows how to send out invoices, and Joe gets COVID and there's no documentation anywhere about how to do it, and Joe's out for a month, do you just not send invoices for a month? So having documentation around those key processes can be critical, especially for a growing company or a small business. The next thing is what I call initiatives. My definition of initiatives is they are projects that increase the capability of the organization. So how do we determine what our initiatives are? Well, the first thing is we know that we have these required strategic capabilities that we came up with during the phase one, the define phase, and we're going to compare them to our current strategic capabilities. We're going to make a list of our current strategic capabilities, and that comparison creates a strategic gap between the required and the current. So this is important to think about. There are maybe capabilities that are required that we don't have. There may be capabilities that we do have that aren't up to snuff. They aren't good enough in comparison, especially when it comes to key processes, right? So maybe a brand promise of ours is to show up within 4 hours of the time that we're called, just to make up a number. And so we have key processes around making sure that we can deliver on that brand promise. But a key process of, let's say, taking an incoming call and dispatching that is only working 50% of the time. So that key process isn't as good as required. So there's still a strategic gap. Even though we have a key process, it's not as good as necessary. So there's that strategic gap. There's a gap between what's required and our current capabilities. Once we've defined those gaps, now we create initiatives, projects to add capability, projects to close those gaps. So this is extremely important. A lot of times we, in larger companies especially, create projects that just sound good, but they're not really linked back to the strategy. They're not really linked back to making sure that we can compete in the marketplace, that we can achieve our organizational results. This phase ensures that the projects that we undertake, these initiatives, are linked back to how we compete in the market and obtaining our organizational results, the results that we desire. All right, so poll 4. Do you have any current projects that will improve your business? A, 0, B, 1 to 3, or C, 4+. Now, I'm going to tell you the right answer is not C. Now, if you're an extreme startup, maybe you have more than 4. But if you are really an ongoing concern, if you're concerned with scaling, you really can't have more than a few projects at the same time. You won't do them very well. So when I teach my clients, we talk about what are, at this point in time, the 1 to 3 most important initiatives that we need to get done and make sure we get those done. It's better to have a couple that you know will help you compete in the market, that you know will help you get the results that you desire and do those well, as opposed to having lots of them just because everybody has to have a project or just because it sounds good. We make sure our initiatives are linked back to our strategy. All right, next set of questions right here for phase 2. Any questions? Anybody? Raise your hand, shout it out, anything. Put in the chat. If nothing, we'll just continue on. All right, we've covered a lot so far. Okay, so let's move into phase 3. All right, so we got this great definition. We understand how we're going to compete in the market. We have this great list of strategic capabilities. We've created these KPIs. We've created these initiatives. Now, how the heck do we actually execute them? Well, this is the most important part, right? A lot of times we come up with these grandiose plans. They look all great on paper, and then we don't really do them very well, or we don't do them at all. So let's make sure we execute. So this is what I call the cycle of planning and execution. And it goes like this. First, we define phase 1. Then we plan, just like in phase 2. Then we move to execute. So we actually do our initiatives. We do the projects. We perform our key processes. We measure those things. Then we review and we make any adjustments necessary. So for our key processes, we perform those, we measure our indicators, we review process performance, and then we make any adjustments necessary. For initiatives, we execute those initiatives, we actually do the project, review the progress of the initiative, and then adjust. These are 4 or 3 completely separate activities. Too many times we bury these things all together, we muddle them all together, and we don't separate out the execution, the performance of our key processes or our initiatives, and the review of those things. We just kind of just do. But it's always better to have a separate phase of review that you know is planned out. So you do your project or your key process for a period of time, and then you review, and then you can say, do we need to make an adjustment? So what does the timeline look like? Well, let's look at this. Do you track important metrics around your key processes? Yes or no? Anybody? This is most businesses that I work with, this is a no. They have a few metrics, but they don't really, because they haven't defined their key processes, they don't really track. They don't have enough metrics. Okay. So this is really important. That the hard part, or the part to really understand about metrics, is understanding the key processes. A lot of times we measure things that aren't key because they're simple to measure, and we don't measure things that are key because we don't know they're key or because they're hard. And this is where a lot of times it's important to get an outside perspective, to talk to other people, other entrepreneurs, CEOs, people like myself, who can help you define those key metrics. All right, so what does the execute timeline look like? All right, first of all, defining, I recommend not doing this, but annually, or when there's some massive change to the market conditions, right? So we don't want to change our strategy, to define our strategy all the time. So we do it annually, unless something really crazy happens, like COVID comes along, or there's a natural disaster, or something like that, right? Some new competitor comes in and completely disrupts the market. Then maybe we have to redefine our strategic plan. But other than that, it's really an annual process. Quarterly is when we go to our planning. Quarterly is when we compare the required strategic capabilities to our current strategic capabilities and define the new initiatives that we need to undertake, and pull out those key processes and make sure that we're doing the right measurements for those key processes. Daily, we're going to execute, right? We're going to perform those key processes. We're going to execute on those initiatives daily. And when I say daily, obviously some key processes may not happen every day, but this is just, when they're needed, as they should occur. There is not a rhythm aside from whatever makes sense for that key process or that initiative. Finally, reviewing weekly or monthly, and then doing adjustments weekly or monthly. Again, if we mix up the execution with the review, we don't do a good job of really reviewing and making the appropriate adjustments. We should execute our processes and then periodically, weekly or monthly, review those processes, review those initiatives, see how well they're doing, and then make any adjustments. We can't really make adjustments on a continual basis. They will not work that well. Now, this doesn't mean that if something crazy doesn't happen during execution that we can't do a quick review and adjustment. But as a normal course of business, we want to separate out the activities of execution from reviewing and adjusting those processes or those initiatives. All right, a couple other things about phase 3, meetings and adjustment. 1, meetings don't need to suck. A lot of times the reason that meetings suck is because we don't match the meeting agenda to the phase. We have a meeting that combines planning, definition, review, adjustments, and it's really hard for our minds to context switch between definition of strategy, thinking about the market as a whole, and something that just happened today that we're going to execute on, or something that we think we need to make an adjustment on. So I always recommend matching the meeting agenda to the phase. So we have a review meeting, say monthly initiative review meeting, and all it is about reviewing those initiatives. That's all it is. We don't bring in there tactical measures. We don't bring in there maybe this now I'm quoting, we don't bring to that meeting a quote or a question of, does this initiative actually help us get closer to our organizational goals? That is part of the planning phase. If we did a good job defining our required capabilities and planning those initiatives, then we don't need to ask that question during a review meeting. And then the next thing is adjustments. I teach my clients to use the creative problem solving method to solve problems for good. So we don't need to have a really fancy, we don't need to use Six Sigma or something really fancy to solve problems. There's a very simple tool called creative problem solving. You can Google it. And so to solve those problems for good, understand where adjustments need to be made from the review and use CPS to solve those problems for good. All right, so this is in summary. Yep, we're reaching the end. Phase 1, define the desired results, do a competitive market analysis using the strategy curve and defining your value proposition. And from that, determine your required strategic capabilities. Then extract the key processes and create initiatives to close those capability gaps in phase 2 in planning. And finally, in phase 3, perform and measure your key processes, execute those initiatives to increase the capability of your organization, and then next, review and adjust. This is the summary of the system of strategic planning and execution. All right, now we've reached the end. So any questions? Again, at the end of this, I'm going to show a slide. You can go onto a page on my website, download this presentation, the slides from this presentation, and some worksheets that will help you with these phases. And then also book a 30-minute meeting with me just to talk about where you are in your business and if there's any questions that you had about this specifically for your business. No questions. All right.
What questions do people have? No. We just gotta be patient with them. People need extra time on the Zoom. I know people were slacking me during this. People were messaging me saying good things only. So I was like, ask a question. Woody asked if you could redefine strategy.
So my definition of strategy is this. Strategy is the capabilities required to compete in the chosen market and obtain organizational results. So, download the presentation. at the website that I'll have here on the next page. Matter of fact, I'll just go to that. Okay, let's do this and then we'll ask more questions. Did you learn one useful idea today? Yes or no? Hopefully we get, hopefully I get one. I just want one yes, just one. All right, Melissa, thank you very much. All right, now I'm happy. Cool. And then, so just for my own edification, I guess, I don't know if that's the right word. What was that one useful idea, anybody?
Come on, people said very much yes. Oh,
this Jen, hold on, get you, let me get on video. Okay. The reason I'm not answering is because I'm trying to absorb everything you just said. So,
It's a lot.
But the one thing that I really took from this is the sense of really separating the plan, the execute, the review, and the adjust, like understanding that like this has to be done separate so that it builds and then I can redo it again, what didn't work. And I think that the issues that I'm having is I'm trying to solve this huge problem when really I just have to break it up and keep working it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a great observation, Jen. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Lauren said she liked the strategy curve. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. When I learned about the strategy curve, when I took the Blue Ocean certification and learned about that, and I modified it a little bit to make it easier to use for small businesses. But that to me was like an eye opener. That was a huge thing to be able to do that. So I can look at my competitors and say, how am I different than them? It makes it so it's more than just like a gut feel. I have something there that actually is logical and makes sense. Angela. Yeah. Brand promises. Thank you, Angela. That's very important. So, we can talk about brand promises from a couple perspectives. One perspective is, what do our customers or our clients, what results do they get? And that may or may not be applicable for any given business. The other thing we can promise is promise our delivery of goods or services, right? So maybe, Angela, you can't promise a certain amount of weight loss or a certain fitness level, but what you can promise is you can promise that your sessions will, now I'm just making stuff up, start on time, that you will, I don't know, be encouraging that if they don't like you within 90 days, they can quit and get their money back or something. So we can take these brand promises either from the customer, a result perspective, or from our delivery perspective. Woody, initiatives to develop the plan. Yes. So Casey, are there any specific differences in this outline between small and scalable businesses? Absolutely not. Because we can look at if our desired results, we look at those things, and in 5 years, we know we want to be somewhere and we're not there yet. We need to scale to get to that. Now we can define those, what are the capabilities required in 5 years to be able to be there? And what are our current strategic capabilities? And then based on those strategic gaps, what initiatives do we need to undertake to close those gaps to ensure that we can scale? So this system will work for a startup that's trying to scale, a stable small business. It could work for General Electric. I mean, the system will work for anybody if we follow it. The big thing is really understanding, is defining those required strategic capabilities based on the results that your organization wants, right? Some organizations don't want to scale. They want to stay small. They want to be, more lifestyle or a comfort business. This will work for them. Some organizations want to scale, want to grow really big. This system will still work for them. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, okay, so to learn more, go to this webpage, visionaryresults.com/renew Nashville. I always say slash because I can never remember if that's a backslash or a forward slash. So I just say slash, but y'all know it. So you go there. You can download this presentation and worksheets. Sign up with your email address, and I'll email them to you. A coupon to my e-learning course. So I have this course under development now, but soon to be released, which will go into great depth over this entire system. So you can get a coupon to the Visionary Results e-learning course, which includes all these templates and worksheets that I'm going to send you, but also much more in-depth ones. And then included in that is a 2-hour strategy definition workshop where I can help you do your strategy definition, define your strategy, work through that stuff. You can also schedule at this page a 30-minute meeting with me. So just, if you'd like, go there, schedule a meeting. I'm more than happy to talk through anything about your business. I love helping small businesses. Obviously, I wouldn't be with the EC and SCORE if I didn't. So I love to do that. So don't hesitate. Schedule a meeting. It's completely complimentary. I will not try to sell you anything. So it's not about that. It is much more about you saying, hey, this makes sense to me. I like it, but I need help with this. Or what do you think about this particular problem? We can do something very focused during that 30 minutes. So please go to that webpage, sign up, download to get the presentation and worksheets, and schedule a 30-minute meeting with me. Any other questions from anybody?
Anything else? Did Jen have something? I thought maybe you unmuted for a reason, Jen.
Oh, did I unmute? Oh, my question, I didn't actually do it for a reason, but I'm actually glad I just unmuted. Is it in the chat? Because I just went to the chat, that link. I'm sorry.
That's a good idea.
I can send that.
Thanks.
All right, who's gonna type it faster? Uh-oh.
Probably you, since I don't have hardly any fingers anymore. Make sure I spelled it right.
And I will send out this video on Slack, and then I'll probably add this link on Slack as well. Hopefully everyone is on there by now. Is everyone on Slack by now? Who else do I need to convince to get on there? Angela, I'll shoot you a message after this. Awesome. Any more questions for Craig?
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me ramble. Hopefully you got something good out of it. Again, go visit, get the presentation, book a meeting with me. I love to help. And if I talk too much, just tell me to shut up because I can get going sometimes.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for coming. Come visit us in person. Bye everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Craig.
Thanks, Zap.